CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars, your audio, your terms.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right. Welcome to episode 65 of the CoCo Crew Podcast, coming to you from an undisclosed location in the American South, where we are working on the secret plans to, well, if we told you, it wouldn't be secret. Anyway, so I'm joined here with, of course, on the phone we have Mr. Neil Blanchard. Hello, Neil.
Hello, John.
You couldn't be with us today, but I'm sure you understand. We all understand the travel restrictions and such.
Yeah, I wish I was there with you.
Yeah. We do have Mr. Mike Rowan. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
We have Mr. Boise Pete. Hello, Boise.
Hello, everyone.
And I, of course, am John Linville. So, welcome, everyone. So, as time moves along, let's see, we are right about 6 months away from CoCo Fest as scheduled, if it actually comes this year.
We hope.
We are, or by the time you hear this, we will be approximately 11 months away from Tandy Assembly,
We hope.
which again we hope will come next year.
Surely by then.
So very good. At least we have more opportunities to get together and hang out. That'll be nice. I know I'm excited. So what's everyone been working on? Who's got a cool project they've been talking about?
Well, I have a cool project. I've just been just trying to
Oh yeah.
that and
Well,
so good things ahead.
Well, I hope so at least.
Yeah.
Neil, what you been up to?
I've been doing the same. I've been working on Gamesters, the arcade Tandy joystick, and also still producing some cartridges.
Awesome.
Almost
Any new announcements or?
Working on the latest version of Flooded. I almost have those ready.
Cool.
I gotta say, I received my Gamester and it blew my expectations away. It is just furniture quality wood and finish. Gameplay on it it's like a whole new computer. Always got a chance to see it here this weekend. What do you think?
Fantastic work. Growing up with the old joysticks we had, just kind of discouraged from playing, the games to a certain degree. This thing is like, sitting in an arcade. It's a fabulous piece of work. It's heavy duty, durable,
It's nice.
solid.
It's man size.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Great work, Neil, and to the guys.
Fantastic product.
Yeah, beautiful.
Nice.
Just
So,
finishes.
That's
awesome.
great to hear.
very cool. Very cool. So just to round it out, I did post a video I've seen of a little demo of some work I've been doing, experimenting with vertical scrolling on a CoCo 1 and 2. Been experimenting with certain, some techniques or whatever and learning things, and haven't quite got a game out of it, but I'm kind of working towards one, and I think we're going to get there. So it's exciting. It's been a lot of fun to work with. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. How about any acquisitions or new stuff? Anybody?
I got a Gamester.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm about to get one.
Very good.
I hope.
Neil, have you bought anything other than your own joysticks?
No. Yeah, it's been kind of dry for acquisitions.
Yeah.
I had been in mostly a dry spell. I'd picked up a few diskettes here and there, just, random things. But then I came across a robot arm on eBay called the Mini Mover 5, which is it's a robot arm made out of aluminum sheet metal, driven by stepper motors. And there's actually some documentation about it, and apparently it's built to interface with the not a CoCo, with a Model 1. But still looks like a cool project, and it's in pretty good shape. I think I'll be able to make it work, and looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Then I bought off of eBay a Eeprom Emulator Kit. And so this is a piece of hardware. I've built the kit. It's a piece of hardware that has a USB port that you can upload Eeprom images to it. And then it has a cable that plugs in where you would otherwise put an Eeprom. And so we can contents of the Eeprom to this little box, and then you can develop Eeprom-based software. And so game cartridges or boot ROMs for hardware or whatever. So put it together, and it's a nicely made kit. Even included a little 3D printed plastic slab that's like a holder for the PCB, so that the PCB doesn't short out or scratch up your table, that sort of stuff. So that's pretty fun. Better than what I've been reporting the past few months. Having something to do, and some new stuff to do it with. So that's cool. But all right, well then that's probably enough for a good little introduction. So why don't we take a short break, and then we'll be back with our announcements.
Since 1994, Cloud9 has made cool stuff for your color computer. Now Cloud9 is proud to announce the 2MB Triad Plus memory expansion board. The Triad Plus works in two ways. Purchase just the Triad Plus board to expand your Color Computer 3 from 128K to 512K of RAM. Or add the new Protector Plus MMU to access the full 2 megabytes of static RAM aboard the Triad Plus. And the Protector Plus MMU utilizes full buffering to protect your CPU. Unlike previous 2 megabyte memory expansions for the CoCo 3, the Triad Plus operates seamlessly without the need for special patches, configuration, or workarounds. Games like Donkey Kong Remix and Sierra Adventure games simply work without hassle. And the Triad Plus will reduce your CoCo's power consumption and heat generation. The Triad Plus and Protector Plus MMU, only from the innovative engineering of Cloud9. Cool stuff for your color computer. Visit cloud9tech.com for details.
Live from the American South, it's the CoCo Crew Podcast. Yay! So how about that? Well, welcome friends. I'm glad the CoCo Cruisers, you've joined us. Time to have our announcement. So let's see. You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We're available on Twitter with a Twitter handle of @CoCo Crew Podcast. That's @CoCocrewPodcast. If you like to send tweets, tweet at us, and we might actually tweet back at you. Let's see. We are available with a page on Facebook, the Book of Faces. And that is, of course, the CoCo Crew Podcast, 4 separate words. Come and join us there. Sometimes we get a little extra or early news or separate discussions related to the podcast or the CoCo, or, sometimes just to entertain ourselves. Come in if you are on the Book of Faces. Come and join us, and, I think you'll enjoy it. We are, of course, a podcast, so we are listed and available on Apple Podcasts, which is formerly iTunes. We're available on Play. And, of course, we have a standard RSS feed at cococrew.org, which you can point your podcatcher at, if they still call them podcatchers. Also, we're available for streaming through the services Spotify, streaming through Stitcher, and also TuneIn. So if you like to listen to your podcast or streaming service, come and check us out. Let's see, we have for some time been taking our audio podcasts and running them through a conversion to a video form so that we can upload them to YouTube. So if it excites you, or the primary advantage of this is on YouTube, you can get subtitles. So if you're not a native English speaker or otherwise have trouble with our pronunciations or accents or anything like that, then you might want to check out the show on YouTube. And we have a playlist that's available through the link in the show notes. Let's see, we are still, I guess, as far as I know, still a member of the Throwback Network. I don't see a lot of activity there these days, but we're still listed, so go and check us out. And if you're caught up on our CoCo Crew episodes and looking for something else to listen to, then we recommend you check out the Throwback Network, where you will find a number of retro-themed podcasts of, that may or may not interest you, but, check them out. We are also available as a listing on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. So again, if you're caught up on the CoCo Crew Podcast episodes, and you're looking for, in this case, something a little technology-themed or gaming-themed or whatever, then check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. The audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you ever need to host audio on the internet, whether it be for your own podcast, your church, your business, your the Elks Club or whatever, then we recommend that you check out Cyber Ears, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you want to reach out and contact the host of the CoCo Crew Podcast, we're available through a number of email addresses. The first three will reach all of the hosts, and so we have show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org. We also have podcast, PODCAST, and feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCoCrew.org. So again, each of those will reach all of the CoCo Crew hosts and notify us of your project or some other news item or ask a question or whatever. Feel free to reach out. We also have email addresses for the individual hosts. So I'm available as John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, NEIL. Mike is Mike, MIKE. And Boise is Boise, BOISY, at CoCoCrew.org. So if you want to talk to us, feel free to reach out. We may even respond. So normally we would have our announcements of shows in real life next. This time of year, they would already be getting a little thin, but this particular year they were thin to begin with. So for now, we've only got listed our scheduled CoCo Fest 2021, scheduled for April 24th through 25th of 2021. And, of course, Dandy Assembly 2021, scheduled for October 1st through 3rd of 2021. So, in both of those cases, be there or be square. Definitely should do what you can to come out and join the community happening there at those two events.
Plenty of time to start putting $1 in the jar.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Get ready to go. You got plenty of time to get to CoCo Fest or 10.
That's right. Failing to plan is planning to fail.
That's right.
No excuses.
So we'd really like to see you, so I hope you'll plan to get there and be ready by the time April or at least October shows up. All right, well, that is the end of our announcements for this month. So why don't we take another little break, and then we'll be back with the news.
Enter a world of decadence. Drenched in rich, dazzling neon color. The TRS-80 color computer. Only available at Radio Shack. Display dazzling graphics. Choose from a rich palette of colors including magenta, cyan, and buff. Decadence. Get your own 4K TRS-80 color computer for just $399. Get 16K for just an additional $119 more. Experience the bold world of color. Decadence. Only at Radio Shack.
All right, well, CoCo Cruisers, and now it's time for the news.
All right, we're starting off. We've got a great set of links this month. We're starting off with a great one from Mr. Jim Gary. The Halifax Tail Gunner game for the TRS-80. Link will take you to the video of the game. Got the view out of the back of the aircraft as a tail gunner shooting down enemy aircraft. That's pretty slick little game. Neil and I have some connection to the Halifax bomber. We took a trip to the National Air Force Museum of Canada to see the only restored Halifax plane that there is.
Oh, yeah? Very cool.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Okay, this next one is from Ed Snyder. Gimme X with 8 megabytes of RAM. So Ed's been able to add 8 megabytes of RAM to the Gimme X. He's got a video showing his memory tests. It's fully from the CoCo. That would be a nice little extra feature if purchasing a Gimme X.
Yeah, very cool.
This next one is from Steve Strobridge. Is Cosmic Aliens for the Color Computer 1, 2, and 3, and Dragon is now available for free at CosmicAliens.com. So this is a game that Steve has been working on, quite a few video blogs of working on it. So it's written completely in BASIC, using a lot of get and put, and it's a pretty slick game for BASIC.
Yeah, it's it looks like an entertaining game, and he's been working on it for some time. Had some community powwows over it, and I think he got frustrated at one point. He got a little too much help or something like that, and so he had to go back to pure BASIC. But yeah, it's cool.
Too many cooks.
Yeah,
that can happen. All right, this next one is RMC The Cave. Why would you want a cassette deck for your PC? Technical. This is an interesting video. I found a tape unit that fits into a 5 1/4-inch bag that looks like it could do all kinds of things, like read files to cassette or back and forth. Just kind of interesting to see the integrated cassette system in a computer.
Somewhat integrated, right?
Yeah.
It's literally it outputs the signals that then go straight back into the sound card on the PC. So I mean, it's cool that, if you have a need for transferring audio, which, obviously, as a retro hobbyist, many of us have at least some need interest in doing. I've thought about buying one of those boxes, but I always kind of wondered, that's so dumb. It seems like there must be a catch, and now I at least know what the catch is. I still might buy one. But
Is that a new product, or is that some old product?
Well, new-ish, like from 2015 or something.
Okay, yeah, so it's not ancient. So it's kind of a retro thing.
So very cool.
Remember when we used to play computer games with cheap plastic joysticks? How the fingers would ache for days.
Put the past behind you. Introducing the Gamester. The Gamester is the ultimate 2-button joystick controller for your color computer, Dragon, and Tandy 1000. The Gamester features a genuine arcade-quality joystick with 2 large arcade-quality cherry switch buttons on a single surface. Best of all, the hardware is mounted in a sturdy wooden cabinet. It sits comfortably on your lap or on your desk. Experience the difference that super high-quality, heavy-duty components make in your gameplay. No more finger fatigue. Responsive button switches. Sturdy components that can take the punishment of even the most enthusiastic player. Every Gamester is built to order. Choose the wood for your cabinet. Choose custom paint or stain and finishes. Select the cable length for your Gamester. Choose a left-handed configuration, or add adapters for your Dragon computer. The Gamester is designed to last a lifetime. To build yours, simply reach out to Neil Blanchard by email. Neil@cococrew.org. That's NEIL at COCOCREW.org. Experience genuine arcade controller action for all of your favorite color computer, Dragon, and Tandy 1000 computer games. For true arcade action, it's the Gamester.
All right, top of my news set here comes from Jim Gary. This is cool. It's actually not a game. He has done, it's a general accounting program, GAP, for the TRS-80 MC-10.
Who doesn't need general accounting for their MC-10? I mean, why? Who would have an MC-10 for anything but running a
Especially
business?
in this day and age.
Yeah.
500 company would just not that.
Exactly.
It is cool. It actually does store the data out to tape, and you can pull it back in, and it's a full-featured.
That's pretty. I mean, it is cool.
Yeah.
In a retro kind of weird sort of way, but still cool.
Yeah. It's neat to see. I like to see anybody using these retro machines for their business, or even for some of their business. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But now you can do it with the MC-10. All right. Next news article is from Video Game Animation Study. It's a YouTube video, and it's called "The Importance of Keyframes and Run Cycles." So it's pretty cool. I checked out this video a little bit, and you can actually see the technique they use. I don't know if you have any experience with this, John?
Well, I mean, like I said, that's the pretty standard, how you animate a cycle for a walking figure or something like that.
Yep.
I think his real point is pointing out that in the more primitive games that had less resources or whatever, that those having just those 4 frames in a cycle versus 15 or something in a newer game, still it made that 4 frame size individual frames that much more important. They sort of stuck out more, had more effect. So I think it's kind of a arguing in favor of retro is cool, basically. And if you're doing game design and want to look for that certain kind of effect, it's probably helpful to have that sort of stuff. So
right, yeah, it's pretty cool to see that. All right, next news article is from another YouTube video. Great Scott, that's kind of funny. It's a YouTube video, and it's on how to waterproof electronics. I mean, that sounds scary right there, just alone. And nail polish, silicone, and potting compound.
Yeah. Well, so, I don't predict many people are going to be waterproofing their CoCos, at least not intentionally, unless they spill something.
Yeah.
But there might be a reason to use a CoCo as a controller for something that then has a water level sensor or something else,
or you might harsher environment.
Yeah, it might have something in a weird environment. So it might be useful to know that kind of stuff. Or even if you want to build a weather station and have the things out in the rain,
True. Protect it from the moisture.
Yep.
Pretty cringy seeing some of those bare boards go into water. Like bubbles, popcorn off of it. It's just the current flowing through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is scary. All right, next news article. It's another YouTube video. Canadian retro things. There you go. This one's for me. My first basic video game, and it's a 2-parter. It's a part 1 and part 2. So it's there's 2 videos showing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's just it's like a video development blog or whatever, and activity in the community. It's cool to see somebody sharing what they're doing, that sort of thing. So.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it sometimes it's just basic, but as basics go, it's a really powerful basic.
Yeah.
Especially graphics.
Yeah, it's not a bad language overall, and for a lot of people that might not otherwise program at all, it's kind of a cool opportunity to be able to do something. So, very good.
If you are a fan of the TRS-80 color computer, then you won't want to miss CoCo, the colorful history of Tandy's underdog computer from CRC Press. Follow the evolution of the color computer from the early beginnings of Project Green Thumb and Videotex terminals to the CoCo 1, MC10, CoCo 2, and CoCo 3. Follow the rise of Rainbow Magazine, Microware, and the CoCo community at large. Get the inside story from Tandy engineers, constantly challenged to reduce cost and increase capability. If you own a CoCo, you should own this book, CoCo, the colorful history of Tandy's underdog computer, written by Boise Pete and Bill LeJudas. Available now at Amazon.com.
Next news item is titled LIM, Creative Computing 1976. This was for Tandy, which was the September Tandy Marathon by a friend of the show, Mr. Jim Gary. Yeah, so this is a game that Jim Gary looks like he ported to the MC10 to emulate a lunar lander simulation, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Looks like it came out of the Creative Computing 1976 issue. Pretty cool. I just scrubbed through the video real quick. Obviously, he's using some of the semi-graphics and puts out some stats and allows you to put in some inputs and I guess try to simulate what it's like to land a LIM on the moon. Very good.
Yeah, that's one of those. I've never quite understood why that type of game is so popular.
Yeah,
it's like I get frustrated with them. It's not really bored so much as frustrated because it requires a lot of finesse or whatever.
Right.
I do like the Atari Lunar Lander arcade game, partly because it's got that big, massive control thing to it.
Big thruster, and it smashes apart when it hits.
Yeah.
I guess that's why we're not astronauts, right?
I guess that's it.
Yeah, very cool, Jim. Thank you. All right, the next news item is TR-80 Color Computer 3 CoCo Band Game Development Video Log Episode Number 2 by Mr. Paul Thayer. This is a YouTube video of a game that I'm not too familiar with. Is this like a version of Sokoban?
Yeah, I haven't delved into it.
It's not the same thing?
I think it's sort of inspired, maybe, but I don't think it's exactly the same.
It looks like Paul is going through, it's about a 40-minute video, and he's talking about, I guess, techniques. He's showing source code in the video and sharing his expertise with getting this game going. It looks pretty cool.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, nice graphics.
Yep. The next news item is 3 pixel art techniques, common mistakes, double jaggies, and outlines, tutorial for beginners by Morton at YouTube. This is another YouTube video, and I didn't get to watch this, but I'm assuming based on the title that he's talking about creating pixels and the artifacts that happen, or creating shapes, right?
Cleaning up pixel art mistakes and that sort of thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, it's a tutorial, and take it for what it's worth. But I think since this video, you can see the results of what it does.
Right.
If you like it.
Cool. All right. The next news item is sampled sound, 1980s style from the SN789 Square Waves samples by Chris Evans. Scary Beasts. Now this is a blog. It looks like he is going through a lot of detail and talking about the favorite audio chip of our friend, Mr. John Linville. Even shows images of his oscilloscope showing the waveforms. This is really cool. I haven't looked into this, but it looks very detailed and very technical.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And, a lot of people don't realize that you can press the chip into playing sample sound. So I think you have to use the DAC, and then if you're going to use the DAC anyway, well, why bother with the chip? That sort of stuff.
Right.
But it can be useful to you don't have to switch back and forth between sources and void pops and stuff like that when you just have the same source. It's another technique, another arrow in the quiver for people wanting to do sound for their games.
Right. Good job.
Pretty cool.
The next news item is alpha version of a new game port of the classic Japanese game Hinyakyo Alien. I don't know if I got that right. Again, by a friend of the show, Mr. Jim Gary. So this again is it's a video, and it's showing this game. I don't know too much about it, but it looks like a maze game.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know much about it either. I think it has some history on that. I've seen that name before, but I don't know a lot about it.
Yep. Good job.
Maybe somebody like Carlos Camacho or somebody who's more familiar with Japanese culture.
And maybe can understand that, yep. The next news item looks pretty exciting. I'm finishing off my reverse engineering of the arcade game Defender by Aaron Bodigal. This is on a Facebook group that I can see called Motorola 6809, 6309, 6800 Assembly Language Programming. Now, just looking at this is pretty interesting. Is this in any way related to what Glenn Hewlett was doing?
Other than the fact that it's the same game and the same kind of activity, I don't think it's related at all. It's Glenn's been gone from the project a while. I think we can't assume that he will finish it. I hope he does. But, if somebody else is interested, maybe it's time to move on. You know what I mean? Anyway, if somebody's doing some reverse engineering or whatever, I don't think he's doing like a
port. No, I don't think so.
Or whatever.
No, right.
But it might be helpful if you are.
Right, exactly.
What he's doing.
Yeah.
So it's something to look at. And if nothing else, it might be a good little side tutorial on 6809 assembly language.
That's right. There might be some trick in that source code that we could all glean some information from. The next news item is Ladderman 2, a.k.a. Super Ladderman version 0.9W by Richard Kelly. This looks like a post about a game. He looks like Richard puts up a disk image. Don't know much about the game, but what do you say, John?
It's, he's had this game. I think we've done some previous updates we've had listed. I think it's like a kind of a sort of a traditional looking platform game, something he's been working on for a while, and he's, we're continuing to gift it to the community essentially, and I think people should check it out. So it looks really nice. I think so. Yeah.
Yep. Good to see that kind of work.
Yeah, definitely.
The next news item. Welcome back to my stream of consciousness log of converting AX to Uchu Dosen Nostromo. Wow, I'm really getting the bad list this time. By Mr. Robert Allen Murphy. Now, this is looks like a blog. It's called In Paradise, which I believe is Robert's tag name. It's nom de guerre, if you will. Mm-hmm. And although I haven't looked closely about this particular post, but he's doing some type of a conversion of, is this a game?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he's really getting into the details here. Looks like it's it runs on a CoCo 2, 32 by 16 screen, a little bit of graphics. Pretty interesting.
Well, like I say, it's another development blog. If you want to write stuff about what code you're writing for the CoCo, we'll plug your blog and let people read it.
Yep.
So let us know.
A great blog.
Yeah.
Learned a lot from.
Yeah, I don't know if this is Japanese or what the language is here of this game starts from. But,
I think it's Japanese, but I'm
another
not sure.
Japanese game. Yeah, interesting. Good stuff.
Graphicom users, you can now digitize video with the Graphicom Video Digitizer. It inputs directly into Graphicom. It accepts any composite video input, use cameras and VCRs, works with multipack or Y cable, view video at close to real time, snapshot any video frame to digitize it into internal memory. No slow, messy serial port manipulations. Just hit your joystick's fire button. It's that simple. Don't be fooled by imitations. This is the Graphicom Video Digitizer, the only one that directly inputs to Graphicom. Requires 64K color computer with disk drive and joystick, just $199.95. From Computize, Langhorne, PA.
All right, well, I think that moves off to my little segment. Let's see. Well, first off is it's another YouTube video from the Great Scott Group. Don't know a lot about them, but they have a lot of videos and they relate to hobby electronics kind of in general. And so in this case, says the video is how to choose the right capacitor type, specifically film versus ceramic versus electrolytic. So if you're into hobby electronics, at least constructing or especially if you're designing them yourselves, you're probably aware that capacitors, which are kind of one of the basic types of electronic components, when they're actually comes to use a real one in a circuit, you have to pick one that's been constructed in a kind of a certain technique, a certain way. And so common ones are ceramic ones, which you often like power supply bypass capacitors, especially for integrated circuits. And you also see the little tin can style capacitors are typically electrolytic capacitors, and these are the ones that are known to kind of go bad over the 20 or 30 year time frame, but have to be replaced, whatever. Anyway, at some level, they're all kind of the same. They all have a capacitance value. They sort of react similarly in a circuit within a kind of reason. So then the question is, well, if I'm going to build a circuit or spec a circuit to be built, why would I say that these capacitors should be film and those should be tantalum and those should be electrolytic and, whatever? Why would I do that? And I can't answer that for you because, I'm a computer engineer, not an electrical engineer. And so, I can take a few guesses at a few ones, but I'm sure I'd be wrong on a lot of that stuff. So anyway, if you're at all interested in the topic, if you're designing hobby electronic circuits or whatever, maybe you should check out this video, and then maybe you'll be able to answer the question, at least within the realm of your own needs and interests. So check it out. I think you'll find it useful or hopefully enjoy it. All right, so moving on. So here's one that seemed a little out of the blue when I came across it. So it says, repository of information from the development of the Star Spores assembly language game for the TRS-80 color computer in 1983/1984. And this is a GitHub repository belonging to the GitHub user. Well, it says David Shadoff. D. Shadoff is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it looks like Shadoff to me. David, Shadoff. And so he's got a GitHub repository so it's kind of like a code repository, and some of it is code and, text documents, notes or information or whatever. And it's all about this game for the CoCo from 1983-84 called Star Spores, which I don't know much about. It says it's largely the same overall game as the one for the TRS-80 Model 1, with some additions and improvements. You can read all. I'm not going to read this to you here, but you can read it, check it out on GitHub. It was basically one of those occasions where somebody releases the source code for a game, says, here, have at it. And so it's up to you if you want to avail yourself of the opportunity of reading that source code and learning something about it. Well, here it is. They're waiting for you. So I recommend you check it out. So, like I said, it is available on GitHub at the link in the show notes. All right, moving on. So we've got a couple more videos, links from the Chibi Akamo's fellow on YouTube. And so like I said, he's been doing various similar language videos for different processors, and in some cases, different examples of machines using those processors. And so he's got a couple more. One is generic 6809 lesson 5, more math, logic and bit shifts and more. And so this is, if you're trying to learn a similar language for the 6809, here's a piece of that instruction related to, certain kinds of math operations. And then he's got another one, says lesson P8. It's sound on the Dragon CoCo. And so if you're wanting to learn how to make sound on your CoCo or Dragon, he's got a video that will walk you through some of that. So a lot of people want to make games on their CoCos, and sound is a part of the game, a part of many games. So look into it, see what you find out. Probably worth checking out.
Cool series.
Definitely, very cool. All right, well, thank you. I forget your name, but Mr. Chibi Akma. All right, and so the next one is from the indomitable Mr. Joel Avi. He's got a recent post in this group brought up the topic of floppy disk failure rates. And so he's done some research based on his collection of floppy disks and trying to read them or whatever. He's got a spreadsheet that's collected his data of read failures with his floppy disk or whatever. And so just a little highlights. He says roughly 33% of the 1.44 megs disk had failed, 9.5 catastrophically, almost 24% of the 720K 3.5 disks had failed, none catastrophically. Of 217 360K floppy disks, only 12 had failed, 7% catastrophically. And the low density 5.25 disks appear to be more robust than the HD 3.5 disks. I don't know if this surprises anyone, but it's kind of nice to see it written down. So interesting. So cool. Thanks for collecting that information, Joe.
Do you own and manage rental properties? Simplify management with the Rental Property Income and Expense Management Package from Sugar Software. It keeps track of all of your properties, provides instant screen or printer summaries, maintains detailed itemized listings of 28 different expense categories, and provides a schedule of accelerated cost recovery and depreciation allowed for each tax year for 3, 5, 10, and 15-year property. The Rental Property Income and Expense Management Package is just $34.95, $32K required, from Sugar Software, Reynoldsburg, Ohio.
All right. Next news article is from Jim Rye. It's two videos on YouTube. Adventures in VCC. So it looks like he's adding features into the VCC emulator.
Yeah. Well, he's I think he's working on cut and paste.
Yeah.
So you can cut and paste from another Windows application into the emulator, and maybe the other direction as well.
Yeah, that'd be very handy. It looks like on the second video, it looks like he has it running here. So,
yep.
Right, our next news article is from Walter Zambotti. OVCC 1.4.0 with Tandy high-res mouse and joystick support released. It looks like they've added the high-res feature.
Yeah.
Pretty handy to have that as well.
Well, maybe. And I'm not sure how much use the high-res joystick is in reality, but if you're one that needs it, it'd definitely be helpful to have in the emulator.
Yeah, basically from the paint programs, I think that's. I don't think too much else really uses it, other than if you're going to be using multi-view.
You can use it on the Nitrous 9 stuff, I guess. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Applications. All right, next news article is from Jeff Burt. In the 80s, Alps made a 4-pen printer plotter mech that everyone used. For Radio Shack, it was a CGP 115 printer.
Yeah, and that was the Atari 1020, I think, and the Commodore had a version as well. I've actually got examples of all of these at the house because I'll use the same little
ink pens,
ink pen things or whatever.
Yeah, I got one.
Anyway, apparently they all have a sprocket or cog or gear or whatever you want to call it that fails, and I think that's what this link is about. Is
3D printed ones.
Yeah, having a version that will help repair that.
Yeah, it says they'll be CNC machined from brass, so that's cool.
Oh,
they should be good
cool.
quality.
Excellent.
Yeah.
The permanent replacement. I'll be good to get one of those.
Yeah, that should last another 20 years.
Right, and there's like a German hospital supply company that has the pens that will work with it.
Yeah.
So keeping it kicking. Doing better than the DMP 105.
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, it'd be nice to get some CGP 220 love next.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. All right, my last news article in this segment is from, this is really cool, I'm excited about this, from Darren Atkinson. It is the MCX 32-SD. So this is like a CoCo SDC, but for your MC10.
Yeah, which of course is, unlike the CoCo SDC, which kind of replaces an existing floppy controller, this is like a SD replacement for a floppy controller that basically didn't exist, although there were a physical version of this MCX32 that I've seen demoed or whatever, but kind of weird, but nice feature to have. It should be something cool to play with. Might get some more interest in the MC10.
I was just going to say that for anybody on the fence about getting an MC10, this might bring them over.
Big boost for it, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what's this shows here, John? It says support for P mode 3 and 4 graphics modes have been added. That's pretty interesting, eh?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Well, I guess that must be with some extensions on the video RAM.
Could be RAM additions.
Yeah.
You got a place to store it, right?
Pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So
Christmas is coming.
Yeah. Nice to see that Darren's still active too, because he's been kind of quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harvey is ready to move on to his next project, but he's stuck waiting on his printer. Waiting and waiting and waiting. But Charlie uses Super Spooler. It allows him to keep working on his color computer while his printer is still printing. It works with Telewriter and most popular productivity programs. Super Spooler allows Charlie to get 3 times as much work done as Harvey.
Congratulations on your promotion, Charlie.
Thanks, Cheryl. Don't be like Harvey. Get Super Spooler today. Just $19.95 US, $24.95 Canadian. From Tandar Systems, Ontario, Canada.
Okay, we got another cool one from Jim Gary. It's called Decoy Beta. Interesting game. You basically hit it against a flying saucer that's shooting at you. You have to shoot it back at it, and you have a decoy, kind of like a countermeasure you can launch that will fool the saucer. It'll sometimes go after the decoy instead of you, giving you a shot at shooting the alien. So, kind of cool. It's got some good animation.
Yeah, pretty neat.
All right, we've got a new product from Jason Reichard. It's the new high-res switch box available for pre-order. So this is a box that you can plug your joysticks and mice into. Switch between, I guess you can switch between the joysticks and the mice. You can switch between, you can have high-res features. You can do the handy high-res or the colorware high-res interface. I guess that's optional, but you can have that as well. So you don't have to keep plugging and unplugging joysticks and mice and save the wear and tear on your CoCo. So if you're interested in that or could use that, contact Jason. I'm sure he's ready to sell you one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still not sure I've ever sat there and plugged and unplugged all those things so much as to actually wear the ports out on the back. But, I can see where some people might.
Yeah. And after, 30-year-old piece of equipment.
30 years, true. But
stuff moves. It'll catch up to you eventually. So, All right, we have one from Sheldon McDonald. Early PSG player work in progress. And related to this is he has a PSG now playing percussion. So PSG is a sound option. This is specifically the one built into the Mega Mini.
Well, no, this is the It's the AY389 or equivalent, I think it's the Yamaha 20, whatever the number is, YM2151.
So it's just a standalone card?
But it's a card, it came up with a couple of years ago. Yeah, so, what I take from this is he's actually got it, he has a player that works with the Gamester cartridge, the SN76489 chip, and he's got, this player is working with, the data files are the same between the two types of hardware.
Right.
So I don't know if he's translating on just one or if he's translating both of them from a common format or what. But pretty neat.
Yeah, pretty neat. And the percussion example he's got sounds pretty neat too. All right, we have one from Dennis Beeson.
Don't know. I think so. Beeson, something like that.
Sorry if we mangled your name. I made a test program to test the DRAM of CoCo 2 that is not using RAM to run. This is kind of cool. This is actually a ROM that you plug into you pull the ROM out of the CoCo, plug this in its place, and it will execute the tests without, running completely from that ROM.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't, it just relies on the processor's, accumulators registers to do everything.
Yeah.
So, kind of a cool approach.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. Anyone that's ever had to write diagnostic code for an embedded system or whatever might have dealt with this sort of problem, especially in startup diagnostics or whatever. And so, if you have a mostly dead CoCo, for example, it might be the only code that you can rely on to run. It's something that doesn't require the DRAM. So.
Right.
And if this doesn't run, then something else is broken. So, pretty cool.
In the 21st century, life on Earth is threatened by a deadly virus. Aboard the starship Trentmoor, your mission is to search the frontiers of the galaxy to find a cure to save mankind. But how? Where? The name of your starship provides the first clue.
Trentmoor, a challenging new high-res adventure game for your color computer.
New from Mark Data Products.
All right. Well, let's see. The last little group of news here. We have another Jim Gary, the Aliens update of the YouTube video. Not a lot of information other than watching. It says working on an engine for rendering Erico Patricio Montero's very compact and very elegant wall designs for his new game Aliens, hoping it will help in his development process. This is a test programmed in microcolor basic for the MC10. So I'm not sure I have the whole story on the Aliens game or the wall designs. It looks kind of intricate, almost like a Chinese character or something. So, the Chinese are beating us to space apparently too. But anyway, it's just one more, perhaps in this case, gratuitous example of Jim's prodigious programming output for the MC10. But still cool to see. I like the designs, kind of neat looking. All right, thank you, Jim. Moving on, let's see. We got one from Samantha Cole at Vice. I think she's probably a staff writer at Vice. And it says 2.1 million of the oldest internet posts are now online for anyone to read. So I think we had a story a month or two ago about some of the archives for early Usenet posts had kind of become unavailable for normal people. And so it's good to hear that somebody has managed to dig up some of those archives so they can be replicated out and made available. So if you want to know what was hot on the internet in 1980 or whatever the years date from, you still have a chance of finding out. One thing that's cool is for some reason the picture they put with this was a picture of somebody playing on the CoCo, which probably has zero to do with the Usenet access unless they happen to be asking Usenet questions about CoCo, but still kind of fun to see.
Take all the love we can get.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, so we got one here from Mr. Robert Galt, or Dr. Robert Galt, I suppose is more accurate. Let's see, he's got posted a disk image, says this disk contains software to read a smartwatch while using a CoCo STC in an MPI with a smartwatch in one of the MPI slots. So I'm not sure that that's actually new software or if it's just the old software which already worked. If you already know how to search the MPI slots, which I suspect, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Dr. Galt shared something similar with me a couple of years ago, and I suspect it might be the same thing. But anyway, pretty cool. If you've got smartwatch hardware and you want to make use of it with your CoCo, and especially if you haven't figured out how, well, put it in a ROM a ROM cart or the floppy card or serial cartridge, and plug it into an MPI, and here you go. Check that out, and maybe you'll be able to keep the time on your CoCo. Your make files will work better. All right, so moving on to the last one for the news items for the month. Also, kind of a head scratcher. So, Mr. Michael Pitsley, he's got a CoCo 1 and a CoCo 3, both with the stock 6809 processors. He's got a program from the Color Computer Programs book called Integrate. And so, it runs on the CoCo 1, runs on the CoCo 3. He's running them on those two different machines, and for whatever reason, it seems to be running quite a bit faster on the CoCo 1, which I think intuitively you'd think that they would at least be the same speed, and I think a lot of us would think that somehow the CoCo 3 would manage to squeeze it out just because 3 is bigger than 1.
Right.
There's been a lot of discussion. I'm not sure there's any actual definitive answers on that other than the fact that the Super Extended Color Basic is doing some patching into the Extended Color Basic, and the supposition is that patching may not be the most efficient it could be, or one way or another is tampering with sort of the destabilizing the design enough that you're causing some performance losses that aren't occurring on the CoCo 1. Anyway, still a neat discussion, and to kind of see people apply some technical analysis or just some scientific theory, I guess, to test these things and see what actually changes and why. I thought it was a cool discussion.
Yeah, quite a cool discovery. What are your thoughts on it, Boise?
I suspect that it has something to do with the fact that Super Extended Color Basic is, as you said, it's patched. It probably not as efficient as it could be. In fact, I see here that Dr. Galt, who we just referenced, asked the author of that post to try an experiment by doing a poke and exec to get the CoCo 3 back into Disk Basic 1.1, not using the Super Extended Basic, basically making a CoCo 3 act as a CoCo 2. And the program ran the same speed as the CoCo 2, so that tells me that's pretty much a Super Extended Color Basic issue.
Well, that's pretty much it.
I think more commands on the CoCo 3.
More commands, right?
Sort through.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It could be that. It could be a number of other things.
Yeah, there were a couple of things raised, like you said, more commands. That there was something about the parsing, that there was some extra looping introduced in the parsing, or something to that effect.
Keyboard scanning.
And the keyboard scanning, there was a difference in how that worked.
Housekeeping.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perhaps, yep. But I think it's certainly an interesting opportunity. Maybe now that we have the source code to Super Extended Color Basic that's assembled into a ROM easily with the LW tools to maybe make a Super Extended Color Basic optimized, more efficient version.
That'd be cool. Just need somebody to champion the project.
30 years is about time.
Yeah. That's a good project.
All right. Well, very cool. That's our last news item for this month. So we're going to take another break, and then we'll be back with some feedback.
Dad, your shop is really booming.
Don't I know it?
More parts, bigger inventory. Maybe you should think about getting a computer.
What, you want me to go broke on some NASA mini computer?
You don't need an expensive mini computer. You need the Tandy Color Computer 3.
What about software?
Microtech Consultants has a complete family of small business accounting packages for the Color Computer 3. And it can handle inventory, payroll, accounts receivable, and accounts payable.
How'd you get to be so smart? You must take after me. Maybe I should get a computer.
We already got you one, Dad.
Running a small business doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg.
Small business accounting software for the Tandy Color Computer 3 from Microtech Consultants, St. Paul, Minnesota.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. Now it's time for our feedback. Our first feedback item today comes from one Mr. Rick Adams, who was the author of OmniStar, which we mentioned in last month's episode, and I'm sure it's in reference to that. He says, I appreciate the gracious shout-out. So, Rick, well, of course, you produce things in the community, and we're going to take a look at them, and if you didn't do your part, we wouldn't be able to do ours. So, glad to give you the shout-out, and thank you for producing stuff that's worth talking about. So, very good.
Absolutely.
All right, so from there, I think, so this is James Jones, and I think he's answering my question of the month from last month, basically, what is your favorite emulator? Which I think he came down to say MAME is currently his favorite emulator, but he kind of throws in a little bit of a jab, too. So he said MAME does a good job of emulating hardware at hardware speed. On the other hand, quote, MAME documentation, unquote, is sort of like insert favorite oxymoron here. And the various ways different INI files override one another kept me from getting it to run for some time. And it is a little painful, especially if you try to get tricky with it. And but I mean, it is really nice. It is accurate, as long as you manage not to hit one of the minefields where somebody changed something for some other system and blew up the CoCo, which does happen. And it's a danger or whatever of open source, a hazard of open source. But you can always use the older source if you need to, right? Or wait for the new source, Anyway, so thank you, James, for the feedback. It's good to know that you've at least got something that you appear to be happy with. It's a little unclear, but it looks like you're happy with the MAME for now, at least as long as you've got your documentation files sorted.
MAME was hard to write, so it should be hard to use.
And definitely hard to understand, yeah. So, all right, moving on. So we got one more feedback item. This one is from Mr. Robert Allen Murphy. And Robert says, the Gamester sounds awesome, and I'm definitely saving up for one for Xmas. So very good. Good to know Neil is going to manage to ship at least one more Gamester this year.
You'll be glad you got it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in the flesh or in the wood.
It is very good. It's very nice.
I haven't played in years. Good.
So very cool. All right. So before we wrap up the feedback, I'm going to pose one more listener question of the month. And so this month we're going to ask, what is your preferred CoCo game controller? And so do you like the old Black Beauty joysticks? Do you like the Deluxe? Maybe you like a hacked up version of an Atari paddle? Or, maybe you like the Sega Master System controller or a Sega Genesis controller.
Or the rotary.
We made a rotary controller a couple of years ago that kind of limited on games for it. But if you like it, I mean, it is kind of cool. I enjoyed using it. Anyway, so what is your preferred CoCo game controller? So send us some feedback or let us know. Either via email or, of course, you can post in the Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to tell us how much you hate us or how much you love us, either one, we'd love to hear that, too.
We'll listen.
Yeah. All right. So let's take another little break, and then we'll be back with, probably our host discussion or some other part of the show. All right. See you in a bit.
In the beginning, people that worked with computers were considered wizards.
Focus, focus.
Tandy took the mystery out of computers, making easy-to-use systems that can grow with your needs. From your local Radio Shack, you can get hardware and software from one source without any hocus-pocus. Tandy, we take the mystery out of computers.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. Now it's time for Notice Your Favorite Part. It's certainly our favorite part. We get to sit around and chit-chat and talk and pontificate, and that's what we really like to do because we're all a bunch of old men. Anyway, not sure I can pinpoint the origin of this discussion this time, but I think something came up in the community that related to this, so we're going to talk about it. And so the question is, color basic or extended color basic or super extended color basic, with or without disk extended color basic, does that set of pieces of software constitute an operating system? And so this is going to be, or could be, a religious war or religious discussion, because the truth is the definition of operating system is a bit unsettled, at least in the community, in the larger community computer science world or whatever. And I'm not even sure that that's a true statement. I think that you probably can look up operating system definitions in academic texts and that are succinct, but they probably allow in a lot more than what most people would want to allow in. And that's probably where I'm going to come in on this one. And so it kind of dates back, for me, the discussion, what is an operating system, kind of dates back to the time when OS2 several years ago was gaining some popularity and didn't quite make it to the world, but it did gain popularity for a while, and then it had its little competition with Windows 95 and 98 before they disappeared. And it was always about what is an operating system, and you get, well, Windows is just a shell on top of DOS, and DOS isn't an operating system, or, well, it does have OS in the name, DOS, disk operating system, so is it one or not? Right? And so that's where you get discussions. And so we're going to have something like that. I don't know where it's going to go because I really didn't preview it with any of our hosts. But I don't know. Do any of you guys want to jump in and start? Neil?
I'll jump in. I hope we can still be friends after.
Go ahead.
All right. I think it does count as an OS. Color basic, extended basic, super extended basic. The reason why, it allows you to use the floppy drive. You got all those extra commands added in there. I know it's a programming language like BASIC, but they've added in all those extra utilities to run floppies and a cassette port and all that stuff. So for me, it counts. That's what I learned. Yeah. That was the first thing I ever learned.
Yeah, I understand that. And you also introduced one more wrinkle to the whole thing. There's some people that would be opposed would say, well, it's not an operating system, it's a language, and therefore not an operating system. And it's like, well, I'm not really sure. For me, I'm not sure that cuts it as an argument, but some people think that that's a valid rebuttal, is that, well, because it's a language, it's not an operating system. And of course, I would have to say, well, what about Pascal on the Apple II, which definitely was both a language and an operating system, and Fortran as well. But anyway, that's a whole different. A lot of CoCo people probably don't know that much about the Apple II anyway, so it's probably not a good argument to introduce here. What about you folks?
I'll split hairs. They point out that it says disk operating system. It's not an operating system per se. Mm-hmm. It's an operating system specific to disk, which it does do. It does what an operating system would do, which is allow you to interface with hardware in a common way. But it's not like an operating system like Linux.
No, true.
Where it, or even Windows these days, OS, where you've got a kernel and everything uses that. Everything calls the operating system to do all the low-level hardware I/O. But disk extended color basic doesn't do that. It just does it for the disk.
Oh, true.
So, I'll kind of say yes and no.
Yeah.
You'll have it both ways.
And that's reasonable, I think. How about you, Professor Boise?
So I'm thinking about this, and I'm of two minds as well. So I think I'll split hairs here a little bit. I think it would be more technically correct to call color basic, extended color basic, an operating environment.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better way to put it. Because I tend to associate operating systems with more definitive modern architectures. As you mentioned, Linux, OS 9 certainly was an operating system. In fact, I remember OS 9 being touted. It's a real operating system,
right?
As opposed to a fake one. So, what is an operating system, right? It's a collection of software that insulates you from the vagaries and the details of the hardware to some degree and gives you common interfaces. If you think about that, BASIC can be designed BASIC with certain vectors to jump in to do different things like read the keyboard, write a character out. So in a sense, it's providing with an operating system-like behavior. And in fact, if you print #-2 or open #-1, those are actually analog file descriptors to what will be on a modern operating system today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have access to operating system-like commands and a operating system-like structure. You don't have a microkernel or a kernel per se,
Right.
but you have code that you can call into to do things and abstract out certain things for you. So in that sense, I think we could call it somewhat of an operating system.
Sure.
And then when you add the disk element to it, it even becomes, it feels more like it's becoming an operating system.
Right.
Now, I'll say this, the thing that makes it kind of against, if you want to argue against it, is, well, I can, load up a machine language program and take over the whole computer and totally bypass any of the protections, and that's true.
It is true.
So you can even do that under OS 9.
But right, exactly. That's more failure of the CPU than the system.
Right, and any lack of controls around the CPU hardware-wise to gate it with any kind of protections.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so, I think that probably leaves us with, at the very least, we could say, I'm sure we all can, at least from a modern perspective, agree that whatever it is not a very good operating system.
Certainly not a very modern.
But it's not involved in a lot of operations that a modern operating system would be involved in. It's barely involved in putting text on the screen. It's involved to some degree with the operations to go to the disk or the tape. Doesn't have to be. Could be left completely out, but it is there, and there are some facilities for that. And like you say, you have the vectors in the ROM. Then they cover the text I/O, at least somewhat. They don't cover the terminal positioning, but you're just putting out text and bringing in something from the keyboard.
Right.
It covers that. The disk extended color basic does have a vector there that and it is clearly it's flexible enough that you can not have a disk at all and still support those semantics and completely switch it to a totally different kind of hardware. You shoot it out to serial port for DriveWire or shoot it out to various forms of hard drives that we have. That is an operating system kind of thing. It's not exactly how we would do it today, but we also have processors with a lot more controls or whatever, where you'd follow their kind of enabling mechanisms for that sort of thing, which might make things a little tougher just to begin with, right? So when the original, whatever preceded this topic before it got into the show notes, there was a discussion of, so we had a predecessor generation of machines, probably mostly with the predecessor generation of CPUs, the 6800, that basically came with a boot ROM. And the boot ROM, the most popular one, or one of the most popular ones, was called MICBug, which was Motorola. Well, I think the MIC may have stood for Mickey. I don't know. Something came from Motorola, and it was a generic, a monitor ROM style thing. Basically, it would just bring up and give you just enough shell access to be able to, load more software or whatever. But it did have a supported vector of entry points that would let you text on the screen and do a few other things, load from tape or whatever. And at least in looking at some of the documentation from that time, you will find references to the MICBug operating system. And you'll find software that says it targets the MICBug operating system. You could get generic software that would run across a range of 6800 based hardware, all using this MICBug entry points or whatever. And MICBug didn't even have basic, right? It basically just had show me what's in the memory, here, put this in the memory. And so if that was an operating system, then I think we would have to call Color Basic and its variations one as well. Again, not necessarily a very good one. I'd rather use OS 9. I'd rather use Flex.
Right.
Nowadays, of course, I'd rather not use any of them for browsing the web, I want to use Linux or maybe Windows or something, or Android or something like that. That's a good option too, Mac OS. Anyway, so it's one of those things. It's kind of like, it's kind of like Christopher Columbus, right? You got to judge him as a man of his time. And so when you go to judge Color Basic, we have to judge it as software of its time. And of its time, I think it was at least a minimally adequate operating system. There were better ones available. There were probably things that were worse available. Like, if you don't think Color Basic is a great operating system, you would not have liked McBug.
I will say that if you think about the OK prompt at the basic, type a line number and type start typing in basic, or you can type a command like dir if you have disk basic load to load something off a cassette. So in that way, it almost feels like it's a shell, but it's also a scripting language if you want to think of it like Bash. Right?
It really is. It really is the same thing. It really is the same thing. And so, it's just a different version of what we had today, or what we had later at least. So
it's an early modular kernel.
Well, right. Really modular. Didn't get in your way at all, that's for sure.
No. I'll take disk extended Color Basic, like Atari's menu-driven thing any day.
Yeah, well, that's true too. Different systems had their own approximations of, to make their things useful that I would have found them less involved or less useful. But
this brings up an interesting thing. There was a product that Tandy sold early on that had I forgot what it was. It was some type of productivity software, but it came with a version of TRS-DOS. Or was it
the disk-based version of EdTasm?
Yes,
had something called TRS-DOS in there, Color Tris-DOS, I think is what they called it.
Right.
And it was essentially a set of libraries for how access file system and stuff like that. It also had some support in there for doing overlays, memory overlays in your program and stuff, which is an operating system function that Color Basic doesn't have really, And for that matter, OS 9 doesn't have overlays. It doesn't really need them, but they have something that's similar in a way, but is different, right? And so, the question: do you need to boot up your diskettes to load that code to then have an operating system? I don't know. I have always thought it would be kind of fun to boot up that stuff on that disk and write some programs that use that. Mm-hmm. But I just have too many other things to do. And I think if I really needed to, I could manage my own overlays. I don't need that code. That's the Kilgis, I think, wrote that code. Yeah. So pretty cool. I think it's the kind of thing that if I'd have known about it at the right time, and if I'd have understood things better at that time, I would have been all over that stuff. But, I didn't understand what that stuff was until another 5 years later. And, by that time, I wasn't really doing that kind of stuff, And for that matter, by that time, I was having arguments about whether or not DOS was an operating system because I wanted to move on to OS2 and then Linux, So, anyway, to return to a childhood, I guess. That's sort of what this is all about. All right, well, does that kill it to the topic? Have we beat it to death?
Good discussion.
All right. Well, we'll draw that for the close. Neil, you still there?
I am.
Good. Well,
this was a great
discussion. We're going to draw this to a close, and we'll let you take care of putting together the rest of the episode.
All right.
All right. All right, thank you, CoCo Cruisers. We'll talk to you later.
Over time, all CoCos suffer from performance loss and increased electricity consumption. That's because even the best-made CoCos create bit plaque during computation. These plaque deposits build up on integrated circuits, causing a variety of performance problems, including increased power consumption, random resets, excessive heat, and clock skips. CoCo Renew is specially formulated to remove up to 99% of bit plaque buildup.
My Color Computer 3 was really getting hard to use. It would keep resetting right in the middle of King's Quest. Do you know how frustrating it is to lose your place in a game? I was about ready to throw away my CoCo 3 and buy a new one. But then I discovered CoCo Renew.
Cosmic rays, beta particles, and the interaction of the moon and Earth's magnetic fields only make the problem of bit plaque accumulation worse.
I tried everything. I reseated chips, I replaced caps, I even replaced the transformer. Diagnostics all passed, but my CoCo was still randomly locking up. I was getting so frustrated, I couldn't even sleep. I started to drink heavily, all because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my CoCo. My life was beginning to spin out of control. But then life changed when I discovered CoCo Renew.
CoCo Renew's patent-pending formula not only removes bit plaque, but also protects your computer from future plaque buildup.
Since using CoCo Renew, my system is rock-steady stable.
One application of CoCo Renew, and it's like a new machine.
Find your GPS coordinates and look them up on the easy-to-use Lunar Magnetic Calendar. This will tell you which day of the month to use CoCo Renew. Then simply disconnect the transformer and the keyboard from your CoCo's motherboard. Slide it into the included Perspex tray and gently pour CoCo Renew over the motherboard until it's entirely submersed. Place the cover over the tray and leave for 24 hours. Remove the motherboard using the included tongs and gloves. Rinse the motherboard gently with a garden hose and allow to dry for 24 hours. Now place the motherboard in the included striped Mylar envelope. Seal it and place it in a dark area for 3 days. Gently remove the motherboard from the envelope and scrub with denatured alcohol using the included brush. Gently rinse the motherboard with a garden hose and allow to dry for 24 hours. Now find the Julian date on the Lunar Magnetic Calendar to find the best time of day to reinstall the motherboard. Reconnect the keyboard and transformer. That's all there is to it. Now your CoCo will perform like new.
No more resets. No more lost games.
No lockups, it runs cooler, and I've started to attend AA meetings.
Don't throw away your color computer. Renew it with CoCo Renew.
Thanks, CoCo Renew.
And coming soon, CoCo Renew PAL, Dragon Renew, and MC10 Renew. Persons using this product assume responsibility for its use in accordance with current directions of the manufacturer. CoCo Renew makes no representations or warranties of any kind, either express or implied, regarding this information or the product to which this information refers. CoCo Renew contains leprechaun plasma derivatives and polyisobutylene. Women who are pregnant or may become pregnant should not be exposed to CoCo Renew. Do not drink or ingest CoCo Renew. Read all warnings and product information before using CoCo Renew. Drinking problem? Visit www.aa.org.
Hello, CoCo Cruisers. Welcome to this month's tech segment. I, of course, am John Linville, coming to you this month from an undisclosed location in the American South. The topic for our discussion this time is going to be a little technique called stack blasting, which is, I think, unique to the 6809. If not, it's not quite unique, but certainly not every CPU has the facilities to do it. When I thought to do this, I've considered doing this topic before, I think, because it really felt like I'd already done it. But I looked around and I couldn't find any evidence that I've done it. So if you happen to know of a time I've done this topic, at least as a tech segment or maybe otherwise, then be sure to write in some feedback and let us know. The only thing I found was in episode 42, I had a tech segment on the CPU stacks in general. What is a stack? And there was a piece of the tech segment that was about stack blasting. I think I'll probably cover a lot of the same stuff there, hopefully a little more in depth. Not so much in depth as to overwhelm too many people, but anyway, yes, what we're here for is to learn, right? Alright, well, it should be fun. So, stack blasting. So what is stack blasting? I kind of didn't really put that in my notes. Let's see. I guess I can get to that. So basically, the concept of stack blasting. On the 6809 processor, of course, we have normal stack register, S, and it's pretty familiar how it works to just about anybody who's ever used a processor, a microprocessor with a stack. And the odd thing about the 6809 is we also have a U, or user stack register, and it works pretty similarly, with the difference, of course, that things like function calls and interrupt service routines only use the S register, the stack, the system stack. The user stack is available for the user. Anyway, so the technique of stack blasting is where the programmer essentially points the stack pointer as well, let's just say as a source pointer, and a use register as a destination pointer. No, sorry, U as a source pointer and S as a destination pointer. And we'll get into why that direction a little bit later. But you could be either one, but it's probably better to use S as the destination. Anyway, you set them up as source and des pointers, and you can use them to move data. And you can move the data, quite a bit of it, fairly quickly. And so that's what my notes here says, move lots of data fast. And so just for a baseline, if you were going to just write a program to move some data, let's say you might choose to use the D register, that's 2 bytes wide, 16 bits. And, if you're going to move a lot of data, you might want to use an indexed addressing mode with automated incrementing and or decrementing for the pointers, just to save yourself the little extra instructions or whatever. So just for a baseline, so the LDD to load the D register, if I'm reading the manual correctly at least, LDD uses 5 cycles, CPU cycles, for indexed addressing mode with no offset. So like a load LDD, comma X, and then you have the store D, STD, also uses 5 cycles. So STD, comma Y, for example, so that's 5 cycles for each of those instructions, the load and the store. And then if you do the auto increment, auto decrement, either whichever you want to do. So if LDD, comma Y plus plus, or comma X plus plus, STD, comma Y plus plus, then that adds 3 more cycles to each instruction. So right there, load LDD, STD with the auto increments. You're talking about copying 2 bytes worth of data between 2 buffers, and it costs you 16 cycles to do it. And then if you wanted to go farther, you want to say 8 bytes, you can copy 8 bytes across 2 buffers in 64 cycles. 4 times as many, because 4 times as many bytes, right? So there was my... Now, under efficient stack operations, that's still the one little line I originally had as my introduction to stack stuff that I improvised and put at the beginning of this. Anyway, so you have 2 CPU stacks on the 6809 S and U. And you have the push S or push U and then pull S or pull U instructions. They can move multiple bytes with one instruction. So whereas the 6502 or the 6800 have specific instructions for each register that you want to push or pull. You want to pull the X register, you got to push X and pull X, and then also do push L, or push A and push B, and pull B, that sort of stuff. With the 6809, you have one instruction that can then you can push S and then give it a list of registers to push, and then pull with the same kind of list, and it comes back off. So fine. So these instructions, so for example, pull U or pull S uses 5 cycles on kind of overhead, and then 1 cycle for every byte you're moving. And then the push S or push U instruction, also same thing, 5 cycles plus 1 cycle per byte. And U and S get updated automatically based on the number of bytes you moved, so there's no extra cost for extra bytes there. So if you want to copy 2 bytes between 2 buffers using this dual stack offset against each other or stack blasting for 2 bytes, which isn't much, but if you want to move 2 bytes, it's going to cost you 14 cycles. And so that is 2 cycles less than LDD and STD, but, okay, not that big a deal. Well, let's say you want to move 8 bytes. You can do the 8 bytes between 2 buffers, and it'll cost you 26 cycles. That's 26 instead of 64. So that's a pretty big difference. So that's, less than half the cost. So that ought to get your attention if you're thinking about programming anything that needs to move a lot of data, at least. Like I say, it's basically just listing every register that you can free up when you do your push and your pull, which isn't that many, but kind of by default, you're talking about X, Y, and then D, or X, Y, A, and B, same thing. And so you're talking about up to 6 registers, 6 bytes of registers there. And you can go a little bit further, and let's discuss that below. But so what sort of caveats are we talking about? It's because you're using both S and U. You got to remember that the S register is still needed for its normal system kind of duties. S is used all the time for normal programming. So, like for doing function calls, you put the return address on the stack, or doing the JSR or BSR does that. And then sometimes you want to pass parameters on the stack. Probably not a big deal, because you're probably not going to do that in the middle of your your big fast data move anyway. But just in case, I was using this and wanted to break up some stuff into some function calls, and couldn't easily do a function call at a certain place because I needed to interact with my stack blasting routine, and function calls kind of mess with that. So anyway, probably not a big deal in most cases, and if you do hit a situation like I did, you can probably code around it, but you got to be aware S is still being used, and like I said, for function calls. Easy enough, avoid them. Probably can do it, but also the interrupts handling, the interrupt status frame, you'll push the interrupt handling will push registers onto the stack, and then restore them later. And this can be destructive when you're using S, particularly if you're using S as a source, because then suddenly you're writing out into what was a source buffer, and so you're going to corrupt your source data. If you use S as your target, that writing is going to go out into your target buffer, and so it's probably okay. But if the interrupt happens, if you have interrupts enabled and the interrupt happens while you're near the beginning of your source buffer, you could overwrite or underwrite your source buffer effectively, right past the end of it at the bottom. So that would be ugly and a bad thing to do. Anyway, so you need to be aware of that. It's not a big deal, but there are things that can happen. Let's see. So U and S, when you use them like this, the U and S are going to be moving in different directions. And why is that? Well, because you're going to be loading up your data with one and using a pull instruction, and then you're going to be offloading your data with the other one using a push instruction. And of course, pull and push or stack manipulation instructions. Stacks grow downward in memory, at least on the 6809 they do. and then when you pop things off, it pushes the pointer higher in memory. During your operation, your U and S stacks are going to be moving in different directions, and kind of normal human thinking, you're going to tend to want to copy a buffer so that, whatever the offset of a piece of data is from the beginning of the source buffer, you're going to want it to end up at the same offset in the destination buffer. You can make that happen with stack blasting, but you're going to have to manipulate the S value in between, or in the middle of your routines, in between your in between the various push instructions to keep the S pointer pointed to the right place. It's a little ugly, maybe a little tricky, but not that big a deal, but it is definitely something you got to be aware of. So let's see, what do my notes here say? Pulling from source and pushing a destination cause movement in different directions. I think we covered that. So we'll need awareness when setting U and S for buffer copies. So, for example, if you're going to just try to copy a buffer directly from one buffer to the next, let's say you're using U for your source buffer, you put your U, point U at the beginning of the source buffer, then you point S, not quite at the beginning of the destination buffer. You're going to want the beginning plus however many bytes you're moving in your stack blast. So, for example, if you're going to be only moving 6 bytes at a time, you'd want S to be the beginning plus 6 bytes into your stack, into your destination buffer, because as you pull U, you're going to move U forward 6 bytes, and then as you push S, you're going to be moving S backwards 6 bytes. And so when you get to that last S, you want it to point at the beginning of the buffer, so you need to start at the 6 bytes into the buffer so it moves backwards. And of course, then once you've done that, you're going to need to adjust S, and it's going to need to move past the 6 bytes you just wrote, plus 6 more bytes to get ready for the 6 bytes you're going to write. So you actually need to move it like 12 bytes. I know, again, that's if you're doing a 6 byte stack blast. If you're doing an 8 byte one or a 4 byte one, it'd be different numbers, but I think you can figure that out. Data can be pre-processed to minimize or resolve such problems. And so once you figure out what you're doing, you can, if you have data that you want to move in, whether it's assets or whatever it is, graphical assets, sound assets, whatever it is you think you need to move, you can rearrange your source data to account for the S and U move in different directions, basically, so that you can get rid of your adjustments to whichever register you're using for your target pointer. And so you can essentially write your source data in backwards, or backwards by chunks is what it amounts to. You'll have to, the chunk sizing or whatever is going to depend on the size of your stack blast. And so you're going to have to tie down your stack blast to a certain size. Probably not a big deal, but you may have to think about that when you write your conversion routine for your data. So you'll probably want to do that where you produce your data in sort of normal fashion, destination fashion, and then run some sort of processor on your data to convert it to source fashion before you include it in your binary. It's not a big task in most cases, but just one more thing to do. You'll have to develop a little tool for yourself. I don't think there's any tools that are particularly helpful in that, or if they are, they're Unix-style tools where you have to write enough scripting code. It doesn't help that much that you didn't have to write any actual C code or whatever. Anyway, it's just something to be aware of. You can eliminate a lot of that stack pointer manipulation if you process your data to kind of account for what's going to happen to it when you do the stack blast. And of course, as I just sort of mentioned, there are dependencies in some of these things for how many bytes are going to be moving as part of your stack blast. If you want to like rearrange your source data to eliminate some of the stack manipulations, you're going to have to be aware of the amount of data that's being moved at one time, so that you can kind of program your chunk size appropriately. So you may need more than one version of a stack blast, depending on exactly what you're doing and why. Another thing I've experienced was working with tiled backgrounds, and the tile sizes were a little smaller than some of the sizes that I wanted to do for movement in another portion. And so I had to have a tile-specific version of a stack blast that it was sort of a little bit of a special thing, but where it basically moved in smaller chunks or smaller destinations, some widths, so that you're not doing, say, for a whole line of graphics at a time. You want to do part of a line of graphics. Anyway, it's something to be aware of. You may need more than one stack blast based on the sizes of the data that you're moving, both X and Y. X more than Y really is the difference. But we mentioned kind of by default you have X, Y, and the D register, that's 6 bytes. If that's not quite enough for some reason, you can add in the DP or direct page register, and so that gives you a 7th byte that can be moved with the push and pull instructions. There's not a lot to warn you about in this one, at least nothing that's not obvious, and that what's obvious should be, if you're going to be moving data through the DP register, then it's at least difficult to know what ends up in the DP register later. And so if you're using any direct mode addressing, addressing that depends on the direct page being set, then you're either going to need to save and restore DP or set it explicitly later before you use the direct mode addressing. Pretty obvious, but it's worth mentioning. Like I said, you can get that one more byte into your stack blast if that's helpful. So go from 6 bytes to 7, for example. One more along the same lines, and this one requires you to be a little bit braver or a little more cognizant of what you're doing. You can also use the condition code register, which is 8 bits wide, so a full byte, and you can add that into your stack instructions. The problem, of course, is if you have bits in the condition code register that control whether or not interrupts are blocked at the CPU. And so if you have hardware on the motherboard, like the PIAs that are able to generate interrupts, or if you have a cartridge that's generating interrupts or something like that, and you're cycling data through the CC register, if any of that data happens to turn on the CPU interrupts, you could end up having to process an interrupt in the middle of your stack blast, which, like I said, in some cases could end up writing data where you don't want to write it, and in other cases, at the very least, could end up taking cycles to process interrupts when you were trying to move data as fast as possible. So, not a great situation. Let's see, is that, so because of, so generally, you're going to want to disable the interrupts at the source, so turn them off at your PIAs, for example, or at the gimme, so that you don't have to worry about whether or not they're enabled at the CPU if there's nothing generating them on the motherboard. So, also best practice is to save and restore the CC register around your interrupt disable and enable, so that that way you don't have to worry about whether or not it was enabled in the first place. If you save the interrupts and then disable, if you save CC and then disable the interrupts at the sources, and then you re-enable the interrupt at the sources before you then restore the original CC, then you're pretty safe. Whereas if you restore the original CC, which had the interrupts enabled, and then re-enable them in the hardware, you might end up jumping to an interrupt at that point when you may or may not have really meant to. So anyway, just be aware. You got to be aware of what you're doing. Let's see. Oh, one other thing, I guess. If you're using CC, those are all the little bits that are used for conditional branching. If for some reason we're going to rely on the value in the status register, CC register, for a later conditional branch, that's going to be all kinds of messed up if you've been using the condition code value for moving data. So basically, just don't do that. I mean, it kind of doesn't make much sense to hope that your status is still set just the right way, but anyway, it's bad to wish for things. If you're going to need to do a conditional branching, you need to make your test explicit before that conditional branch after you've been using the CC register. It's just a good practice. All right, I think that covers most of what you need to know. Let's see. So, kind of a recap or summary. So, the 6809 has 2 hardware stacks. The S stack or system stack, which is basically like any other CPU stack, and also the U stack or user stack, which mostly is just like the S stack, except the CPU itself never uses it. There's no interrupt processing on the U stack. There's no usage by any of the normal, jump or JSR or BSR calls. So the U is kind of a freebie for you to use. Normally you would use it for whatever kind of program you want to manage the data on a stack. But in this case, you can just use it to take advantage of the stack instructions, which are very efficient. So again, we have the 6809 push and pull instructions. There's both push S and pull S, and then push U and pull U versions. These instructions are very efficient. You can move multiple registers, or do load and store of multiple registers per instructions. Well, we can do multiple loads in one instruction and then multiple stores in a different instruction. Anyway, you can move a lot of registers at the same time. It's the point. One instruction, so it's efficient in terms of storage or whatever, but then also minimal overhead. You have a few cycles for the basic overhead for the instructions, and then one more cycle per byte of moved. So it's a very efficient way to move data. So as I said, there's some trickiness to how this SNU pointer or SNU pointers, stack pointers, SNU pointers. There's some trickiness to how they're managed, especially when you're using them to go against each other like this. So you need to be aware of that. Keep in mind which direction things are moving and that sort of thing. There's a couple of extra registers that you can use for this data movement that you normally wouldn't use or wouldn't use very much. So things like DP or the CC register, which you use a lot but don't even think about because you normally don't read or write from that register, but it is there, and you can use it for this data movement. So anyway, if you're going to use DP or CC for part of your stack blasting, then it requires a little bit more special care. But it's worth it. This is the fastest way of moving data with a 6809 program that I know. There may be some way to add some other special hardware that moves the data or whatever you've got. But I don't think there's anything better that's a pure software solution. And so like I said, you can do 8 bytes at a time, and it's just blazing fast, especially compared to having to do loads and stores of your own. So anyway, I hope that's been helpful and useful and entertaining, and we're going to have to call it at this point. So CoCo forever, and enjoy. Take care.
Add the power of CP/M to your color computer with Color Power 2. Just plug the Color Power 2 ROM pack into your 64K color computer 1 or 2. Connect your disk drive and composite monitor to the ROM pack. Insert our diskette and you now have access to thousands of CP/M applications. Run WordStar, DBase 2, SuperCalc, Multiplan, and thousands of other popular CP/M titles. Color Power 2 displays clear 80 by 24 text on your composite monitor with true upper and lower case. On board is a powerful 4 MHz Z80A microprocessor, and the Color Power 2 comes with its own power supply to keep your CoCo running cool. Color Power 2 with Digital Research CP/M 2.2 is just $329. Absolutely no modifications to your color computer needed. The Color Power 2 from Color Power Unlimited Incorporated, New Providence, New Jersey.
This month in CoCo history.
Welcome to This Month in CoCo History, where we explore events in the life of our favorite home computer. I'm Boise Pete, and this month we go back 30 years to October 1990 and the announcement that sealed the fate of the color computer line. On the 26th of that month, Ed Juge, marketing director for Tandy Corporation, sent out a press release that the Tandy Color Computer 3 would no longer be produced. It signaled the end of the line for the decade-old color computer platform. It wasn't a completely unexpected move, however. The CoCo community at that time had already experienced the cancellation of the OS 9 Level 2 upgrade, and Radio Shack's aggressive price drops on the computer signaled that they were interested in clearing out inventory. The future, as Tandy saw it then, was the PC-compatible line of computers for the home as well as the business. Not to be deterred, the CoCo faithful continued. The Rainbow magazine would keep its monthly publishing pace for another 2.5 years. Rainbow Fest would continue, and new CoCo software would still be advertised in its pages. Because of Tandy's prodigious sales reach through many of its stores, the CoCo 3 enjoyed a production run that is believed to be in the several hundred thousands. This amount of product would ensure that decades later, a CoCo 3 could still be purchased on sites such as eBay and Craigslist, and occasionally at thrift stores or yard sales. And while we knew that fateful day in late October was inevitable, the CoCo 3 continues its adventure of learning and fun even to this day.
And that's This Month in CoCo history.
Welcome back to Neil's Corner on episode 65 of the CoCo Crew Podcast. This month's segment is going to be a doubleheader. I'm going to mention 2 different games that have recently been announced and made available free to download. The first game is Cosmic Aliens, coded by Stevie Stroh, as we mentioned in the news segment this month. I tried out this game quite extensively, and I must say I was very impressed with it, especially considering the game engine is written and running 100% in BASIC. Cosmic Aliens is a fast-paced arcade game and best described as a mix between Space Invaders and Galaxian. What caught my attention about this coding project Steve took on was the fact he originally wrote the game back in 1988 for a college programming class on a 640K Tandy 1000 DOS PC. The graphics he used were all ANSI color text graphics. Seeing the screenshots reminded me of BBS door games, and we all know how much I like ANSI graphics in BBS door games. So that's definitely what caught my eye. So when Steve went to recreate this game for the CoCo, to me it was an upgrade. Although the CoCo has severely less power, I say upgrade because he was able to use P-Mode 1 graphics. On the disk image, you will find 3 files. One huge BASIC file containing the main game code, and 2 small binary files containing the title screen, and the other file for game graphic images that get loaded on the P-Mode 1 screen and are captured with get and put statements. If you want to try this game out for yourself, you can download it at www.cosmicaliens.com. You will need a CoCo with a minimum of 32K and a joystick. I highly recommend checking it out. For a game coded in BASIC, it runs at a nice clip, has great graphics and sound. Oh, and it even has a high score counter. Excellent job, Steve. Thanks for creating this game and sharing it with the CoCo community. Alright, the next game I want to mention is another new release, and it's called Digger 3, The Saints Ascension, published under the Hypertech Gaming label. Now, opposite to the first game I mentioned, this one is definitely coded 100% assembly language. I'd be safe to bet there isn't even a hair of basic code in this game. It is coded by the legendary Chet Simpson, who also brought you Digger 2, Return of the Saint, and Gold Runner 2000. Digger 3 is a long-awaited follow-up to those previous games, and I must say it was definitely worth the wait. I'll read you now the brief write-up Chet wrote on his website. Digger 3 is an arcade-style platformer with high-resolution graphics, smooth detailed animation, and over 30 levels of exciting action-packed gameplay. With the release of Digger 3, Hypertech Gaming continues the legacy of Hypertech Software, originally formed by Eric Crislow, Mike Halland, and Chet Simpson, to bring high-quality software to the color computer and beyond. Run, climb, fall, dig, and escape. Take on the role of the man known only as the Saint, as you infiltrate the hidden underground lair of the Gomer clan to take back what is rightfully yours. Snatch back gold, jewelry, and other treasures while avoiding the Gomers, as they patrol the caverns protecting their booty. Avoid bubbling lava, radioactive monsters, rabid bats, and deadly traps while digging holes to trap and kill Gomers. Collect all the treasure in each cavern to advance to the next level and pray you reach the exit to the surface. This game is similar to Lode Runner, but definitely much more advanced. If you want to try this game out, which I highly recommend, you will need a Color Computer 3 with 512K memory, and joystick is optional. However, it is recommended for easier gameplay. The graphics are incredible with smooth scrolling and animation with digital audio sound effects. Digger 3 looks so good, you would think you are playing an Amiga 500 game. You can download this game for free at www.hypertechgaming.itch.io. Another great thing about this game is even if you don't have a lot of time, it doesn't have a steep learning curve, and the average game session is 10 minutes or so. You owe this to yourself and your CoCo 3 to try this game out. Believe me, your CoCo 3 will thank you for giving it such a workout. Well, there you have it. Another 2 new games you can download and play for free on your CoCo. Both different coding flavors as well. Until next month, happy CoCo gaming and retro forever.
Big B Pro Quarterback. The incredible new football simulation for the color computer. Pass, run, kick. You call the plays. Compete with a friend or challenge the computer. Pro Quarterback is just $16.95 and includes versions for systems with extended color basic and non-extended color basic. Experience the thrill of pro football with Pro Quarterback from Big B Software, Broomfield, Colorado.
Well, we have reached the end of episode 65 on the CoCo Crew Podcast. As usual, I'd like to thank our host, John Linville, for procuring all the news articles each month and providing us with knowledgeable tech segments. This one reminded me of the Sega Genesis because I remember those ads back around, I believe, 1992 when they used the term stack blasting. They used that in one of their ads, and it just always stuck with me. I'd also like to thank Mike Rowan for creating all those awesome commercials and painstakingly editing the podcast. Big thanks goes out to Boise Pete for being our CoCo historian. He remembers it, so you don't have to. Last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you who listen and support us each month. Keep your feedback coming in. We really do like to hear from you. Until next month, happy CoCoing and retro forever.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo. 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 CoCo.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway?
It's a blast from the past.
Dance, dance, dance. Dance, dance, dance.
comes.